So this is the fourth fly in a series of Thunder Creek flies that I'm tying. This is a Redfin Shiner. I've mentioned Keith Fulsher's book on tying Thunder Creek flies. One of the interesting things is he has a lot of patterns in there that have been developed for various types of baitfish. You've got emerald shiners, you've got suckers, you've got redfin shiners, you've got small bass, you've got small trout, all of these kinds of things that when it's a small fish, it is fair game for a bigger fish. So the nice thing is he's got a whole bunch of different patterns that have little variations to them that then help to represent a different species. So if you have, say, redfin shiners are prevalent in your streams, not too many emerald shiners maybe, then there's a pattern for you, or vice versa. This one is tied similar to the other Thunder Creek streamers. It has a little red bucktail actually tied on the underside of the hook to represent the male of the species in its spawning colors. So that is a Thunder Creek streamer, the Redfin Shiner. I'll get started tying. I'm going to start this Thunder Creek Redfin Shiner with my hook and the vise. This is a Mustad R75S in a size 6. I'll go ahead and debarb the hook. These Thunder Creeks, generally you want to have a 4 to 5, maybe 6x long streamer hook on these because they are a longer body. For thread, I'm using a Danville 70 Denier in white. I'm going to attach my thread just behind the eye of the hook, and I'm going to start advancing it down. The end of the head space on these Thunder Creeks is about a third of the way down the hook shank. A lot of people will tie these and they'll just stop right about here and they have just a kind of a roundish head on them. Actually, the way Keith Fulsher likes to tie them, it's a much longer, slimmer head. So I usually go about a third of the way down the hook shank. If this were a longer shank like a 6, if this were a shorter shank like a 4X hook, I might even go halfway down the shank on that. It's important, I think, that you keep the heads of these kind of long and slender. However, the Redfin Shiner has a couple of different things under the wing, and one is some silver flashaboo, or I should say crystal flash. I'm using a flash accent for this, and that is going to be tied in on top of the hook shank. So right here I'm going to tie this in, still advancing my thread down the shank here. I'm going to fold that over, and that's just 4 strands. It doesn't have to be a lot. And keep advancing my thread down, and I'm going to keep going all the way to about a third of the way down the hook shank. I'm going to cut these so that they're just past the bend of the hook, maybe an eye length or 2. That's all you need, not a whole lot of flash. Now, if that's getting in your way, you can wet those down a little bit, kind of collect those together. So hopefully that and the bucktail won't get in your way. Now, what makes this more or less a redfin shiner is that there's going to be some red bucktail tied underneath here. So I've already cut some bucktail out and stacked it, but I need just a little bit. I've got a little bit too much here. So, and I generally will pull out too much hair because I can always thin it down if I want a little bit less. If I don't have enough, then I've got to cut out a whole new clump and start over again. I have stacked this. You can wet all of this to help kind of control that a little bit more while you're tying the fly. I'm going to tie this on the bottom portion, and I want the red bucktail to be as long as the flash. All of that will be inside the wing or the body of the resulting fly. Keeping that on the bottom portion of the hook shank, I'm going to advance my thread forward. I'm going to cut this away so it's just shy of behind the eye of the hook. Wrapping the thread forward, I'm collecting all of that down to the hook shank to tie in the belly and the back. These Thunder Creek streamers are really pretty basic. There's not a whole lot of materials to them. And this particular one has a brown back to it. So I've got some brown bucktail here that I've already taken out and stacked the tips. This as well is too much. I need about maybe 2/3 of that to possibly even just half. Some people will put too much bucktail on these. They are one of the flies that sparser is better, so less is actually better. So I took about 1/3 of that out, almost half. This too, you can wet down to help control it. I'm going to put the tips right up behind the eye of the hook here, and I'm going to cut, or I should say tie these in and fold them back, but I want them to be longer than the underbelly here, the red and the flash. So I'm going to go maybe about 1/3 of the hook shank further back, and that will be my tie-in spot. I'm going to tie that in right behind the eye of the hook. Careful not to really pull down on that thread too tight right there, because you don't want it flaring out and wrapping around the hook shank. I usually will go back a little bit. You'll see in a minute we're going to tie in the white, and when I bring my thread back up to there to tie in the white, I can pull down on the thread a little bit more behind the hook shank, excuse me, behind the eye of the hook, focusing on what I'm tying and not really what I'm saying. The brown bucktail is a little bit short, the fibers on this, and this is what happens if you kind of lose hold of them while you're tying those all in. You end up having to kind of pick out all the extras to clip all that out. If they're real short, I wouldn't even worry about it, because the resulting bucktail that folds back over is going to cover those up. But I'm going to be a little picky here. See if I can't get all of these out. Without cutting any of that flash out. Tying those in. We'll wrap those down in just a minute. Again, I got to get my thread right behind the eye of the hook here for the belly. So I'm going to get up here, and now I can kind of pull down a little bit while I'm holding those bucktails. Again, you can have a dish of water here to wet these down. It helps to control them a little bit while you're tying the materials in. So I've got some white bucktail already cut out and stacked. I'm going to take a little bit out of this clump that I have here. And this is going to be the belly. Nice thing is, the belly, all I have to do is measure that against the brown here. And I want that to be at least no longer than the brown, but even just a little bit shorter is not bad. Again, tying that in right behind the eye of the hook. I'm going to put a few wraps to secure that in. Going backwards, I'm going to wrap a little bit tighter to really secure it in. But then I'm going to come back up here, wetting down the brown bucktail to try and control it a little bit more, as well as the white. What I want to do is I want to make certain that I have a couple wraps that are just right behind the eye, because when we fold this back, we want both the brown and the white to fold back from the same spot, and hopefully they're going to be right up against the eye of the hook. But again, when I fold this back, I don't want to fold the brown back and then have the white possibly, folding back here and have a gap underneath the brown, or vice versa. So this will all fold back, and that has a nice even head to it. Advancing my thread rearward, I'm going to trim off the excess here. Not quite all the way back to where the head's going to be tied in. Clean this up a little bit. Bring my thread down to the end of the head space here, and this is where I'm going to tie all this in. I'm going to take the brown, fold it back first. What you want to do is make certain that you have all those fibers under the same tension. I'm going to fold that over here, keeping it on top of the hook shank. 2 or 3 wraps in, and now I'm going to push down with my thumb to scooch that down around so it's covering up the upper half of the head on both sides. Then still securing that in this hand so it doesn't wrap around, I'll put in a few more wraps just to make certain that that is all secured to the top here. Now I'll turn the fly over and do the same thing for the white. I'll get 2 or 3 wraps in, push down on that white so that it too spreads out, and then I'll put in a few more wraps to make certain it's good and secured. Now, what I learned in reading the book Keith Fulsher did on these flies is he prefers the bucktail from the lower portion of the tail because it's straighter. And that's all well and good. The problem is that it also it's thicker and it has more air pockets in it, so it tends to flare. You'll notice this is kind of flared out a little bit. What I've also discovered is that if I collect all this together, bring my thread back down to the back here, and then I just put in a couple of really light wraps like this to kind of just go around it, I don't pull down on that, but I can collect the hair a little bit together and it's less likely to flare out. With that done, I will put a whip finish right on that white band. I want to make certain I'm not wrapping that in on the rear portion and end up tightening up and flaring that out. Now I'll put the epoxy on. I don't put any head cement on those thread wraps there because I'm going to be mixing up some epoxy to put on there. Now you'll notice how I mentioned earlier how I measured the back and the belly. You notice the back here just goes a little bit past, the tips are just about, a quarter shank or so past the flash and the underbelly. The white is just a little bit shorter than the tips of the brown. So that worked out just kind of the way you wanted it to. And the red is on the inside portion of that belly. Now for epoxy, I'm using a Devcon. This is a 30-minute epoxy. It's referred to, I think, as a 2-ton epoxy. I'm going to mix it up with a little toothpick here. I'm putting just the equal portions on this little piece of paper. I use Post-it paper for this because it's just disposable. You want to just put, a couple of drops is really all it needs of the resin and the hardener because we're just doing one. Now, if you're going to be doing half a dozen or so, then, mix up some more. It's a 30-minute epoxy, so I have tons of working time on this. So with this 30-minute epoxy, you want to make certain that you're mixing it up very well. Take a good minute or so to mix that up. So I've been mixing for about a minute or so, which is what you want to do. Like I said, the 30-minute has lots of working time here. So I'm going to collect a drop or so of epoxy and start to spread it out. I start right in the middle, right here, and just start to rotate the vise around, spreading this out. You don't want this to be a super thick coating of epoxy. It's very thin, and it's going to do a couple of things. It's going to help secure the bucktail up at the head, as well as going to give you a platform for painting on eyes. So that's why you want to make certain you're just putting enough on there to coat that bucktail, but we're not putting so much on that we're going to end up with a round kind of bulbous head on this. So at some point, I'm going to work my way around the back, and I'm just going to get some epoxy right on those thread wraps. This is going to help to secure those thread wraps, again, protecting the fly a little bit. It also gives us a platform for tying, or not tying, it gives us a platform for painting in the gill flash. Now I'm working my way back forward again. Hopefully my hand is at an angle you can see all this. I just noticed that I probably have it right in front of the camera there. I'm working my way back forward, getting a little bit of that epoxy to go over the front of that bucktail. Now what I've noticed is I have just a little bit too much. There's a little bit more than I would care to have on there. What I can do is I can use the toothpick. As I go around, I just take the toothpick, pushing it down and kind of rotating it so that I'm getting some of that excess off. Then I'll take the end of that toothpick again that has a little bit on there and just smear that around to make certain it's smoothed off. We're going to put this on a rotator and let it set for probably about 5 or 6 hours before we paint the eyes. So a lot of that epoxy will thin out, spread out, and smooth everything off. I've got one lone hair sticking up there, and rather than at this point trying to get my scissors in there to cut that out, I'm going to set that out here, and I'll just cut that out after this all hardens up. If I had noticed that before, I would have clipped that out ahead of time. So there is the epoxy head for our Thunder Creek Redfin Shiner. I'll go ahead and put this on my fly turner here. And as I said, this is going to turn for at least 6 hours. It's going to take 3 or 4 hours. It's actually going to take a couple hours for it to fully harden, but it's going to take another 3 or 4 hours for it to tack up, meaning that it's going to be tack free, what I should have said. So after a few hours of turning, that will be tack free, and I can go ahead and paint the eyes on and set it over there. So hopefully you're picking up some of that on camera, but so when I'm ready to paint the eyes on, we'll come back. So the epoxy is all set up on our Redfin Shiner here. I did mention at the end of the last little segment when I put the epoxy in, I had this one little hair that was sticking up here. I'm going to go ahead and trim that off now. That's pretty smooth. If I had a little bit of a rough spot there, when I put some more epoxy on the eyes, I might put just a little bit there. But I think, matter of fact, I just roughed it up a little bit there. So I will put just a little epoxy over that. But for the most part, certainly would not affect the fishability. So at this stage, I'm going to put in, the eyes are white with a black pupil, and I'm going to put the white in right now. I'm using a Tester's enamel paint for that, and I'm going to put the red gill flash in. I have a toothpick that I just chopped pretty much in half. I'm just going to tap that on the side. I'm going to bring this around to the other side, bracing my hand there for just a little bit. I'll get the other side. Now for the gill flash, I'm just going to use my bodkin here. And I'm going to get just a little bit, not even half a drop. I'm just kind of coating the end of my bodkin because I am going to just put this on the lower half of those thread wraps. I don't want to touch the white bucktail because that bucktail can kind of soak up that enamel a little bit. Hindsight, I probably should have, for this eye, dipped the toothpick back in and gotten a little bit more on it. So when you just touch it, because I tried to touch it and move it around a little bit, and then you don't get that nice round appearance to it. Still kind of refining that. I didn't mention it earlier, but I'll go ahead and mention it now. To make the eyes on this, you just get a couple of toothpicks, and you're going to take one toothpick and you're going to cut it further down past the taper. So that's past the taper right there. So you're going to cut it off. So it has its widest spot right there. Then the second one you're going to cut off in that taper. So this one you can see where I've cut this one that I use for white where it's wide, but then this one's about halfway up that taper on that toothpick. If you want a little bit smaller, you can go further up on it. It's up to you. What that does is it just gives you this tapered end right here is just a little bit smaller. So when we put the black on, it just goes in the center as just a little pupil. So I'll let this set for about 3 hours, and the enamel will be all set. We can put our black pupils on. Then I have to let that set for another 3 hours for the black to set up, and then we put just a little dollop of epoxy on the outside of the eyes to just try and protect those a little bit. So we'll come back and get that black pupil in there in just a minute. So the Redfin Shiner is all set. The white enamel and the red enamel have all set up. It actually sat overnight, but I think probably about 3 hours is enough. It'll set up enough for you to put the next step on. That's put the black pupils in. I've got my black enamel and just kind of the same setup. I'm bracing my hand here so that I can just touch that a little bit like that. All I've got is about half a drop on the end of this toothpick. For some reason, that particular one didn't want to go in quite as nice and smooth as the other one. But it certainly is fishable. So I'll let that set for about 3 hours or so, and when it is all set, I will put another little layer of epoxy just over the eyes to help protect those. And then that will set up for probably about, after a couple of hours, it will be set up, but it won't droop. But I usually will give even the 30-minute epoxy a good 12 hours to totally set up and be totally tack free. So we'll come back in a little bit and we'll get that epoxy on. So it's been about 4 hours, actually about 5 hours since I put the black pupils on here. I'm going to go ahead and I've got some more epoxy mixed up, and I'm just going to put a little bit of epoxy. I'm getting about, again, half a drop on part of a toothpick here, and I'm just going to put that on here, and it's just going to go over the outside of the eyes like this. That's it. I'll spread that around here just in a second. I get some more for the other side. Again, I just want to have about half a drop that's hanging right on the end here. I can just put that on there like that and take that off. I'm going to take the other end of this toothpick And I'm going to put just a little dab right here on that one little spot. Again, using the vise as a kind of a brace here, just to kind of cosmetically get that looking a little bit better where I had to fix that. Then I'm going to, maybe I don't have to do this, because what I want is I want this epoxy to kind of be all around the outside, not like a paint, you're not going to see it, but I don't want it all collected right up on top of the eye to make it look more pronounced and rounded. As you can see right here, it's kind of rounded. That may settle, I don't know. It does have an interesting effect to make the eyes look a little bit more magnified. Can't get around some of that. But this is just making certain that it's all well coated, just right on the eyes. So that essentially completes the Redfin Shiner Thunder Creek with all of its epoxy and paint and various coatings and everything. Thanks for watching today. Thank you for joining me at the Vise today. I hope you learned a new pattern, at least a tip or trick here and there. If you'd like to help Dress Irons, you can like, comment, share, subscribe, all those wonderful things for the video. You can also head out to dressedirons.com where you can buy flies, tools, stickers, and merch, or you can join a growing community over on Locals at the Dressed Irons Fly Tying Guild. You can also donate to Dressed Irons if you want through the link at the bottom of the description. I thank everybody for their ongoing support, as it really does help the creation of these videos. And what's important is to remember, only fly tying. If you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong.